two, and one. Welcome, everyone, to our seventh and final Re-Leaders Reunite keynote session with the one and only Simon Mainwaring. Simon Mainwaring is the founder and CEO of We First. He's also a Re-Leaders Top 50 keynote speaker. And he is on here today to talk about how you as a CEO and how you as a leader can lead in turbulent times. The word uncertainty gets thrown around a lot. Do I need to say anything more than Greenland, Venezuela? Tariff was a big word last year. And we have many CEOs in the community who are trying to figure out how to navigate these times, these challenges that they're all facing. And when times are turbulent like these, it's kind of natural behavior to sit back and wait until someone does something. But in today's conversation, Mainwaring is going to be talking about how to lead throughout these turbulent times and what that all means. So if you're tuning in here from YouTube, LinkedIn, or here with us on Riverside, all you need to do is just comment and we will actually see your questions pop up. Simon's going to stick around for a little Q&A afterwards. So if you do have any questions, please go ahead and ask them. Also, in the chat room, we'd love to see where you're chiming in from here today. Are you in Los Angeles, California? Are you in Miami? We'd love to see where everyone in the world is chiming in from here today on the last session of Re-Leaders Reunite on day 3. Without further ado, we're going to welcome our friend, another member of the Re-Leaders community and one of the top 50 keynote speakers in the world, Mr. Simon Mainwaring. Simon, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, and shout out to the whole Real Leaders community. And I'm excited to share some thinking today, and I'd like to start with what is a very personal story that really changed the trajectory of my life. It was 16 years ago, and I was living in Los Angeles, and I woke up in the morning, 7 in the morning. You're walking out of your bedroom with bed hair and boxer shorts, and I walk into the kitchen, and there's 5 messages on the answering machine, which shows you how old I am. Answering machine, look it up if you're young and don't understand what that is. And I looked at the messages, and I was really perplexed because why am I getting 5 messages overnight? And so I pressed the play button. First message from my mum. Simon, wake up, pick up the phone. Please pick up the phone. Very strange message. I kind of shook myself out of being asleep. The beat plays, second message. Simon, pick up the phone, please pick up the phone. And I realized she was shouting down the phone to try and wake me up from the kitchen to where I was in my bedroom because she was calling from Sydney. Third message, my sister, Simon, please pick up the phone, please pick up the phone, wake up, wake up. Fourth message, my mother, now upset, Simon, pick up the phone, please wake up, wake up. Last message. Simon, Dad died. He was calling to say goodbye. Call us when you wake up. Now, I hadn't seen my dad for 5 years before that because I was running around the world being a far too self-important ad guy and had really lost sight of what was important in my life. I had worked in Australia and London. I'd been the cool guy working on Nike at their ad agency. I'd been in charge of a global account running Motorola for Ogilvy. And yet, I was not challenged. I was not finding meaning in my life. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, these messages arrived. And I think those words, wake up, took on a profundity for me that even my mum didn't intend. And probably for the first time in my life, I got out of my own way. I didn't try and control it. I didn't try and make sense of it. I didn't retreat to my head and write a list of what I need to do next. I was feeling professionally unchallenged by work, and now I had this personal destabilization. And for the first damn time in my life, I just sat in the stew of not knowing what to do. And I think in hindsight, what I was looking for was meaning in my life. And it just so happened that Bill Gates gave his creative capitalism speech at the World Economic Forum and then later at the floor of the General Assembly, where he said, we need the private sector to play a bigger change. And I took that very much to heart because, as I said, I think I was looking for meaning in my life. And this was quite literally that wake-up call. And that's why I started my company, We First. That's why I wrote the book, We First. That's why I course-corrected my life to try and find some alignment between who I am and what I care about and what I do every day. Instead of playing some performative role, kind of inhabiting these projections of what other people say is success or what life or you or what you do should look like. And so that really has charted the course of my career since then, but it would not have happened without that rude and resounding and deeply moving wake-up call. And those circumstances, the world in which we found ourselves in 2007 and 2008, pales in comparison to what's going on today. And let's look at why. I mean, we live in this post-trust world. It is so disorientating, having no true north. We are in a post-truth world, a post-trust world, where we don't know whether what we see with our own eyes or hear is something that can be believed and acted upon. And individually, incrementally, that's disorientating. But as an aggregate, it's so confusing as to what cornerstone, what keystone of knowledge are we going to build our lives and our actions and our impact on? And you see this with the Edelman Trust Barometer report that finds 70% of consumers globally find themselves struggling to come from a trust disposition. They're predisposed to be hesitant or unwilling to trust someone who's different from them. And that's 2026 data. We're also in a high stakes world. Davos is going on right now. And as Kevin mentioned, you've got all the challenges around Greenland and Venezuela and geopolitical destabilization, not to mention extreme weather events and so on. And if you look at the data from what is their global risk report that they do each year, this is 2026, the short-term greatest risks to humanity as a species include geoeconomic confrontation, misinformation, polarization in society, and weather events. And if you cast your eye 10 years down the track, you see the top three in green are all climate related: extreme weather, biodiversity loss, and really critical change to the Earth's systems. So we're living in a world that is not only defined by crisis, but will increasingly be so. And then finally, we live in this highly volatile environment. I don't know what it's like for you, but I look at the headlines every day and a shudder goes through my body. I consciously kind of limit my access to social media and news headlines now, because you've got to self-regulate your own emotional engine these days just to get through the day. And if you look at the chief executive data for 2026, in 2026, there's almost a 6% drop in optimism amongst CEOs. A 6% drop. And we haven't seen something like that since 2003 or 2004, despite COVID, despite the global economic meltdown in 2008. So this world that we find ourselves in is far more disruptive, far more demanding, far more unpredictable than even that world, the world that it was in 2007 and 2008 for me. And that's a challenge for all of us on this call, on this line. And how are we responding? You know, not surprisingly, there's been mixed response. There's a lot of pressures coming from different angles for different reasons. Some of us have cynically reversed course. They've been expedient to a fault. Many of those have been called out, and it's very costly to their reputation, as you saw, for example, with a brand like Target when they walked back their D&I commitments. And some are operating as if the old trust contract exists, which is a little bit head in your sand, because it doesn't. What worked even last year, let alone 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is not going to work today, either in your individual leadership capacity or how you show up as a company. Or, and the vast majority, I suggest, are adrift, where we don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. I have never seen such a quorum of institutional and executive paralysis as right now, where people care, they want to take action, they just don't know what responsible leadership looks like. And I've seen it break out into 4 categories. As like many of you, we go across to all the different conferences during the year around the world. Some are deflecting and literally purging themselves of references to, I don't know, climate change and more, DE&I and more. Some are containing it. They're not going external and talking about their commitments, but they're pulling it internally and they're making their focus internal only, as you see with Apple, most recently around greenhouse gas emissions, and really they're focusing their attention on what's going on internally. Some have adapted, and Potential Energy put out an interesting report which shows the shift in language that many companies are doing to calibrate responsibly in terms of fiduciary duty and so on to the moment. For example, instead of saying, let's protect biodiversity, now the regular person doesn't understand what biodiversity means, and they may well kind of feel it gets politicized easily and it alienates them. Instead of saying that, you say protect plants, animals, and where they live. Much more accessible, much more middle of the aisle, especially in the United States. And then there are those that are doubling down and advancing. You saw this with Costco in and around their DE&I and their shareholders, their commitments, as well as Ørsted and Iberdrola, which has really been leaning in from a policy and activation or an activism point of view to protect wind farms, especially in the US. So ask yourself for a second, where do you fall in that matrix? Are you deflecting, taking cover? Are you containing and looking inward? Are you adapting your language? Or are you advancing and doubling down? Just take a second, honestly, to yourself, privately. With those 4 in mind, here's our opportunity. Here's the reality. The challenge is we can't ignore what is material to what will drive our resonance, what will drive our relevance, and what will drive our reach. We cannot walk away from our mandate, our responsibility, because all of these challenges are opportunities in disguise, but they're also a responsibility. So let's look at some of those issues that are top of mind. Let's look at climate. I mean, we are feeling it, every single one of us. In the course of the last 12 months, my wife, family, daughters, and I lived through the fires in Los Angeles, wearing masks, being moved from building to building, talking to friends who lost their homes, their livelihood, all the things that were so cherished to them. And at the same time, we've seen these dramatic storms, these atmospheric rivers that have wiped out so much of the city. And you've seen that play out in similar terms across the country. We are feeling it. 69% of consumers say it affects their daily lives. And we want to care. Edelman tells us that 63% of consumers buy based on brand trust. And there's an opportunity for you as an individual leader, as a company, as an industry leader, to take the mantle of change, because ESG products are actually driving 56% of category growth over the last 5 years. So this is not just doing good or doing, what is admirable. This is about doing the right thing by your business. So climate is top of mind. We want to care, and there is a business opportunity there. We should also look at the next major pillar of challenges, which is politics. Obviously, everyone has the right to choose what they believe in, how they show up, and how they vote each midterm, each election cycle. But it's having a real impact on so many lives in dramatic ways, as we're seeing in Minneapolis and more. To make a finer point on it, the US, the EPA, is now taking regulatory action, canceling $12.5 billion in clean energy funding. Huge consequence, walking back a lot of work in terms of service of people and planet. And yet we're kind of stuck in the middle of it, this paralysis I'm talking about, where 71% of consumers say brands should take a position under pressure. And at the same time, serving customers through that greater transparency and fairness actually drives business performance. So there's this world of contraindications that is so confusing. And then finally, technology. the elephant in the room that is clearly visible, most notably AI. I mean, 64% of the public think there'll be fewer jobs over the next 20 years. We've seen so much corporate headcount being lost. We're seeing so little of those jobs being replaced, and we're uneasy about it. Yet at the same time, yes, the companies themselves, but even more broadly, we're all breathless as to, the profit, the business, the revenue it could generate in the trillions of dollars. And yet at the same time, there is that parallel narrative that AI and technology more broadly can enhance human contributions, enhance human skills, allow us to step away from some of the sort of procedural and efficiency-driven skills and lean more into those which are really additive in terms of impact in our future. So we're uneasy about it, but we are in awe, but there is that opportunity to scale humanity. So this is just a snapshot of the landscape in which we find ourselves today as compared to what I saw back in 2007 and 2008. And I ask you to pause for a second and ask yourself a very, very sober question. What will the world ask of you and your company in the next 5 years? This is not theory. This is not projection. This is not what could I do if I wanted to show up as a good corporate citizen or citizen in the world. Given the reality of what I just went through and your lived daily experience, pulling forward, what do you think the world will ask of you and your company in the next few years? Will it need to stand up on a political issue? Will it need to double down on its climate initiatives? What are you going to do to show up in a way that is not only appropriate, but responsible, given the reality of the world we now live in? Take a moment and just clock in your own mind where you think you or your company is going to be hit. If you're a trainer, a coach, a speaker, do you need to magnify your efforts and build a larger cohort of evangelists out there making a difference? Is that where you're going to have your impact? Are you going to have to retool your company as a CEO to get very clear about your purpose and your values and the role you're playing in the world? Because these conditions are here and they're going to intensify. And that's our opportunity to reimagine leadership for a more resilient, responsible, and restorative future. The world of do-good is dead. I'm somebody who at WeFirst for 15 years, we've been hoping that business can go up and to the right and we can all build a better future, and the reasons for doing so are self-evident. That world is gone. We are now in a world of resilience, de-risking business, and being responsible and accountable for the impact that such initiatives are having. Where is the ROI? So that we can not only do the work that we want to do, we can justify it to leadership and we can scale it and sustain it because it is actually delivering business value. That's the new mandate. That's the reality of the world we now live in. And let's unpack that a little bit. A lot of our work that we do has been in defining the purpose and culture and storytelling around organizations that want to show up in a way that's responsible to their bottom line, but also to our future. But there was also a lot of performative purpose out there. And I think if there was any silver lining to the last 18 months, which has been so difficult for so many in our space, it's that it shook out many of those who were either disingenuous in their efforts or pointing to one thing when they're doing a lot of other things that don't serve our future, or they were just paying lip service to the idea that business had a fundamental responsibility to stakeholders in our future. And at the other extreme, you've also got pure performance, which is metrics driven alone. And we equally see that if you are devoid of meaning, devoid of purpose, devoid of values, you may get short-term results, but very quickly internally at a leadership or at a company-wide level, you get cynicism, you get talent churn, you get cultural erosion, and you make these ad hoc decisions that really don't have a longer strategic arc behind them. And those days are over. And that's because of the complexity of the world that we're in. I mean, to give you an example, we had the opportunity of repositioning Mammut, which is the iconic alpine adventure brand based out of Switzerland. And their positioning was all around, Swiss since 1862. But they realized and saw that due to climate change, The glaciers are melting. The very habitat that makes their business possible is disappearing before their eyes, literally by looking at the photographs on the walls of their offices and then looking out the window. And so we worked with them to create a new purpose, to create a world moved by mountains, which gives everyone an active role, everyone a role to play in that creation of not just the act of mountaineering itself, but really to create a world, whether that's Asia, whether that's Australia, or whether that's Switzerland, moved by mountains. The beauty, the experience, the generational transfer and knowledge and love of those mountains. So their recognition of the impact of climate on the habitat that makes their business possible forced them to move from what had been a very privileged position as the industry leader in alpine, mountaineering and adventuring to something much more committed to the reality of the world that we live in. Secondly, if you look at this reality, we've got to accept that we are still human beings sitting around a campfire telling stories. This fleshware, this flesh and blood isn't going anywhere. Agentic AI and bots may become our new companions at work, but we are still here, and we are still the drivers of business and industry and society and life. So meaning still drives results. But if we're honest with ourselves, as someone who's been in this space for almost 20 years, stakeholder capitalism did create value and progress. It really did. And that's why there was so much pushback from parties who wanted things to stay the same way because they were doing very well. But at the same time, as we move forward, we can't embrace technology at the cost of meaning and humanity just in the name of efficiency. So we've got to keep going. It's almost like the more resistance we get, the more certain we can know that all our efforts are not wasted, but they're proving that we're getting the resistance because change is becoming true. And we can't let this new AI opportunity ladder down our efforts all to efficiency and lose sight of the fact that meaning and humanity is just as important. And to make this real, to put flesh on the bone, Sprouts in the US is a wonderful specialty grocery store with over 400 stores, and their purpose is to help people live and eat better. And we had the opportunity to work with them on SproutsCon, which is when they bring together 2,700 employees to animate that purpose, to make those words, which might otherwise sit on a wall in your office, to make them real and tangible and actionable. And so you can see just snapshots here of, everyone wearing the t-shirts in and around their purpose, everyone volunteering as employees, ideas as to how to bring that to life, how to make it a creative exercise, a co-creative exercise that adds what? It adds meaning and it creates humanity inside the organization. And in terms of that business rigor, they've seen their stock price go from $40 a share all the way up to $170 a share over the recent years on the strength of their purpose. So it does still drive results, meaning and humanity. And thirdly, in this context, we wins. I've been a champion of we first for a long time as a counterpoint to the me first mentality that's got us into trouble way back when in 2007 and 2008. And that's why I called my first book We First. But the point of it is this. There is a flywheel effect. There is a compounding effect, a force multiplier effect of things working against us. When we over-extract resources, when we disregard our waters and rivers and so on, when we destroy biodiversity, there's a cascading effect between all of those. But those same dynamics can work to our advantage. Those same dynamics can create an equally, if not more powerful flywheel in the opposite direction, but that only happens when you take collective agency across your leadership, your employees, stakeholders. That's your competitive asset. If I was to say that there is one contrast between work that is being done now to support business and our future, it's that in the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of people have tried it on their own. But no one billionaire, no one company, no one industry is going to course correct our future. Instead, we need to do it together. And as you see, there's larger dialogues now in and around collective effort. In fact, the vice chairman of Davos put a post on Instagram recently where he said, we need a new story for business and society, we need to move from me to we. And I couldn't agree more. So that collective needs to work together in new ways to inspire trust and take action to sustain performance. And again, just to put some meat on the bone, what does that look like? You know, we had the privilege of working with 7th Generation over the last year, and this is an offsite, a retreat, where we brought together 7th Generation and the Laundress as part of the Home Care North America collective, which is part of the Unilever family, to really work as a team to identify what's working, what's not, and what are new ways of working to move forward that don't just deliver on those high expectations for growth and impact, but also foster culture, add meaning to the work, and really reanimate the purpose of the organizations. So that's what this work is about, to make sure that between employees, between brands, across an enterprise, you actually get that force multiplier effect of co-agency. So with that context in mind, with that pattern interrupt, that shift from me first to we first, but also to collective action, what do we as leaders need to do? What are the mindset shifts? I've had the privilege of having a column in Forbes for 14 years, and then there's been over 400 interviews with CEOs and founders. And it's such a gift, because what you uniquely get is some pattern recognition across these CEOs and founders that are driving change and impact, what's working, what's not, and why. And I want to share some of those mindset shifts based on those data sets. Firstly, leadership will be defined by your ability to manage through multiple crises at once. Disruption, division, displacement, it's going to continue to destabilize our future. There is no going back to normal. In fact, the way I think about it now is, we all know, and especially in Los Angeles, a Steadicam, where you see that guy with this huge contraption and apparatus all around him, right, with all the bits sticking out, and he's wired in and got the camera, and he can run upstairs, through corridors, jump over a wall, and while he's taking all those hits, the camera stays steady. Your line of vision stays steady, and it creates great cinematography. That's what you need to be. You need to be the shock absorber that can take geopolitical destabilization, extreme weather events, economic turmoil, political disruption, and hold the course like a Steadicam throughout that. That is our job, and it is not the exception, it is now the rule. So you as a leader, as a professional, sitting there in your quiet moments or in front of your company or as a founder, speaker, coach, you need to deeply integrate this idea that sense of destabilization, of almost treading water in a churned up sea, that is the new normal. And the sooner that you can acclimatize and regulate your interior life and exterior behavior to that ongoing reality, the better equipped you will be to lead. Because there will not be a change away from that. If you have a moment of peace or calm, grab it. But it is going to be the exception to the rule. And just to give you one example, we've recently worked with Emerald AI, which is a very exciting partner to NVIDIA that throttles energy from the grid to data centers. But just think about AI as one issue that you're going to have to wrestle with. In this case, AI is a good thing. AI takes too much energy. AI is going to compromise our planet in terms of its energy uses. AI is going to cost us jobs. AI is a bubble. The chips, the CPU, the computing power of the chips is advancing so quickly. All of those sort of legacy chips that have been purchased by all of these companies, all the loans against those are going to be defaulted on because they're obsolete before they know it, because these new chips have more computing power. All of these issues are inherent within one brand, within one category. This gives you a sense of the multiple issues that you're going to be dealing with, even through one lens. Secondly, from a mindset point of view, you need to back out of the future, not build on the past. For good reason, for so long, out of fiduciary duty or just good economics, you would typically look back at the last year. Did we do better or worse? How and why? Let's do a little bit more of what worked and a little bit less of what didn't. And you're building on the past. But the past has less to do with the future than ever. Because you think about it, we've got the half-life of technology shrinking before our eyes. These computing powers, as I understand it, these new chips from NVIDIA, they have the computing power of 2.5 times the entire global internet in one of these chips. Astonishing. And from everyone we listen to, it's only going to increase exponentially. At the same time, you've got crises like climate and biodiversity and ocean acidification, not only individually accelerating, but they're interconnected and they create that cascading effect. So they're increasing and compounding. And then thirdly, you've got demographic shifts. We've got these younger demos coming through. These are people who know nothing other than a lived reality where all they've heard is that their future is at stake. So they're going to look at life very differently. So if you sit there and go, what worked last year, you will have certain results. But if you cast your eye 5 years down the track and you say, where will the world be? Where will our industry be? Where will I be? And work backwards and plan with that in mind, you are so better prepared for the world to rise up and meet you, and it'll be here twice as quickly as you expect. And just an example of that, Ørsted, a large energy company out of a Danish energy company that was really one of the leaders in Europe around oil and gas. And they went through a very complicated, and costly process to migrate completely to being one of the largest wind energy companies. And their commitment is to make sure the entire world runs on green energy. And as we've seen reported in various ways, this is the first year ever that green energy has overtaken oil and gas and is taking up all the extra capacity. So that movement is working, but they were an oil and gas company and they had such success. They've been positioned at the top of Corporate Knights, which is the sustainability ranking in Europe, several times. Massive transformation, costly, so much time and effort, but they're backing out of the future instead of building on the past. And then third mindset shift that I've observed. As much as we need to learn something new, we need to remember what we forgot. We need to remember what we forgot. As we become more fractured in our lives, more disorientated about our future, more worrisome about our kids and what's coming our way, the further back we should look for the inherent wisdom, the innate wisdom of Indigenous peoples and First Nations around the world, who understood intuitively through lived experience what a symbiotic relationship to the natural world looks like and how we can be additive to that and really enjoy the abundance that living systems provide if we work with it and within it, rather than presuming in some sort of command and control sense that we are sovereign over it. So we need to look back and pull that past forward as well in the way that we think and we go, what our goals are as business leaders. And a dramatic example of this, albeit as a private company, is, somebody that people point to in the press a lot, which is Yvon Chouinard and his family with regard to Patagonia. And yes, they gave up ownership of the company and all its proceeds to nonprofits that serve the planet and its restitution, but the signal they were sending is much more fundamental than that, which is that Earth is our only stakeholder for his business. Earth is the only stakeholder because without that, we're compromising our own life support system. And that reset the bar in terms of how the role of business can frame itself and go to market. But that's remembering what we forgot. It's going back to first principles. It's looking at the fundamentals and saying, given the stakes, given the situation we're in, given the forces that are already unleashed by us against us, this is what he felt he needed to do. So they're the mindset shifts that I would share from talking to so many CEOs and founders over the years and learning from them. And here's my question to you. How prepared are you and your company to lead through these turbulent times? Thinking about the conditions that I spoke to and thinking about these mindset shifts. Just ask yourself for a second, are you in tune with that? Is that your point of departure, unconsciously or consciously, in the way you're going about your business, whether you're an independent solopreneur or whether you're leading a company of 100,000 people? Is that where your mindset is? Or are you still in legacy mode, survival mode, scarcity mode, and really retreating from the opportunity and responsibility, if you're honest with yourself? How prepared are you and your company to lead through these turbulent times? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10. Would you say a 3, a 4? I honestly would probably say, I don't know, I'm a 6. I think there's a lot more that myself and we first could do. Now, obviously, shifts in mindset are critical, because if you want shifts in behavior without shifts in mindset, you're unrealistic. Because if you've got the same mindset, your behaviors are going to default to what you've already always done. So having made those mindset shifts in the context of the reality of the world that we now live in, what are key behavior shifts for you as a leader, as an individual, or as a company? Number 1, please document a truth. Don't sell a story. The examples of companies that have been taken to task are legion over greenwashing, green hushing, local washing, all the washing that's being done. Instead, if you go about doing your work with integrity, all you need to do is shine a light on what you're really doing and then document it in a way that's authentic. It doesn't need a high production value. In fact, everything we hear today in and around the response to AI is the more lo-fi it is, the more believable it is, because we're in this post-truth world. So make it real and make it visible. So for example, with Charity Water, perhaps you're a non-profit leader, perhaps you're part of a non-profit or a foundation or an NGO. They've always been such a powerful brand in terms of addressing the water crisis because they've been such effective storytellers. And their latest iteration is this experience lab, which gives you this hands-on experience of storytelling, data, and technology to let you see what the water crisis is and how your actions will actually drive real results. Check out the Charity Water Experience Lab. Many, many dimensions to it. Secondly, be the celebrant, not celebrity, of your stakeholder community. The number one mistake in all of our work around strategy and culture and storytelling and sustainability with all these purposeful brands is that their best of intentions waste their precious resources because they talk about it in a self-directed way. Look what we did. Look at the hours our employees volunteers. Look at what we achieved in our sustainability report. Instead of positioning your brand as a platform on which all of the stakeholders stand. Look what our suppliers did. Look what our employees did. Look what the retailers did. Look what consumers are doing. Create content around that. If your point of departure is to celebrate the stakeholders throughout your value chain, you'll come up with a completely different range of ideas than if you were talking about yourself. And an example of that, Levi's, they have a wonderful Wear Longer project where they actually get Gen Zers to repair, refresh, and reimagine their clothes by learning the practical skills they want, because they want hands-on experience, because that gives them more meaning than some sort of abstract awareness of what you're doing. Great example by Levi's, Wear Longer project. And then thirdly, we as one. I've touched on we already, but what you've got to do is look at your decisions, your execution, all the comms you do around what you do as one operating system to get that force multiplier effect. And we are lucky enough to be one of the partners in this larger effort around addressing mental health and well-being in young women during COVID, around anxiety, depression, suicide. And the Brave Together platform brought together enterprise, brand, influencers, retailers, consumers, all to provide a safe space as a resource through Crisis Text Line to make sure that young ladies were doing okay. And it was especially relevant to their brand, given the beauty industry that they're in, how they feel about themselves. So we had a mindset question, which is like, how well prepared are you to lead through these turbulent times? Let's look at behavior. How can you and your brand force multiply your impact? Who's the partner you can find? How can you reframe your messaging to get off yourself and onto others? Who can you celebrate? Because that will get much more resonance and reach to whatever content you're producing or whatever message and impact you're trying to share. So just think for a second. Take 10 seconds. Who's one partner? First one that comes to mind. Oh, should speak to who? Who is one unexpected partner, a competitor? that you could work with? Who is a non-profit or a foundation who could bring more boots on the ground impact to you? How can you force multiply your impact? With those mindset shifts and with those behavior shifts, in my direct experience through talking with CEOs and doing the work with so many organizations through the great team at WeFirst, we have seen that there's a dramatic acceleration in the reach, resonance, and results that you get. And not surprisingly, because not only has your come from changed, but also the dynamics that you're engaging create an interconnected flywheel that amplifies and compounds your results. And so what do we do now? Well, the reality is this: whether we like it or not, if you're an individual coach, speaker, leader, solopreneur, or whether you're on the C-suite of an amazingly complicated enterprise, the reality is this, and we see it in the headlines every day: business can't survive in societies that fail. That is the reality. There is no way around it. And at the same time, that means we're going to have to show up differently for our own survival. Now, we could do that now, or we could do it later. It doesn't matter. We all get to choose, but that's the choice, now or later. We could do it fast, rallying around and grabbing that mantle of responsibility as leaders, or we could do it slow and take our time and wait for the competitor to do it first and wait till it's normalized within the industry. And we can do it alone, and to a large degree we've seen those results, or we can do it together and really be that human scaffolding on which our future can be built. Because ultimately, deep down, I believe the best and perhaps only hope for business moving forward is the business of hope. But when you ask yourself, well, should I be hopeless, or is there any hope? You need to reframe that. Because when I actually talked to Rick Ridgway from Patagonia not long ago on an interview, he said, you've got to earn hope. You've got to put the effort in, take the action, and keep going. You've got to earn hope. So the best hope for business is to earn that hope. And so, it's almost 20 years ago now that my life took a different direction because of that wake-up call. And I really, to this day, don't think that when my mother said, Simon, wake up, she had any sense of the profundity that it would take on for me with my father's passing. But in some way, I look back at it and go, as tragic or unexpected as it was, the only gift that I can give back to him is to show up differently in the world as a function of that catalytic moment. And I think for everyone on this call, as you're a solopreneur or leading a large organization, the world around us is that wake-up call. For us at WeFirst, we're showing up in a way that really tries to build coherence between what leaders are deciding, what the teams are doing, and what your consumers are experiencing across your leadership narrative, your leadership conviction, what your team culture is doing, how you engage consumers to those efforts, what thought leadership you're putting out there, and how you're showing up in terms of sustainability and AI. But the question is, how will you answer that challenge? What are you going to do differently? Every one of us individually has every right to be afraid of our future on our own. But we equally have every reason to be optimistic and excited about what we can do together. Everyone who is watching this has self-selected to run towards the fire. And whether it's your life, whether it's your family, whether it's your company, whether it's your community, whether it's society at large, whether it's business, or whether it's this precious planet that we share, every one of those is your wake-up call. So I invite you to lean in moving forward, to assume that mantle of responsibility, to evolve your mindsets and behavior to that end, and to reach out to others, lock arms, link hands, and to really build a better future together at a time when it's desperately needed. Thank you very much.
Simon, thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for giving everyone here another wake-up call today. Let's talk about a wake-up call, right? We're in this moment in time. You and I talk about this behind stage a good amount and on our calls often. You're always asking me, what are you hearing from other CEOs? Business is down right now in terms of the entire ESG sector. What do you think is going to be the wake-up call?
I think the wake-up call, it's interesting where we look for the signal. If we're looking externally for the signal to do more, and now's the time to go again, I think there's a place for that, but at the same time, I think we're looking in the wrong place. I think the wake-up call, the signal, is from within ourselves. More and more, both personally and in the coaching that I do, and also the CEOs that I speak to, the shift in their actions is a function of the work they're doing on their interior life. I think the inner work we do will change the outer actions that we take. So it's a maybe curious way to answer your question, but as all of that's going on out there, I think we sort of pause, we look inward and go, okay, who am I in this world and how do I want to show up? And what do I need to do to show up differently? And only when you've done that inner work will you then act differently, and then people will feel that force multiplier effect. Specific to the external signals, all the data, 2026, not 2025, bears out the fact that doing this type of work up value chains and down value chains and within organizations is only additive to business. So it's not just about doing good, it's doing well. Now, we may not be making as much noise about it. In the US especially, or with global companies, they may be taking some sort of air cover. But you still need a viable supply chain. You still need products. You still need biodiversity to create the materials for those products. You still need people who want to work with you. You still need reputation advantage out there in the marketplace. You still want to inspire consumers to be advocates for your products. You still want to be relevant to today and the future. So to me, there's no signal to wait for. Just do the inner work, lean in, and occasionally when you're running really hard, you look across and you go, damn, there's my peer and they're going like hell too. Great, and off we go together. And that's the only way to be.
I want to thank you for sharing that. I really want to focus on, there's so many stakeholders, right? And it's tough to get it all right as a company. And what I'm noticing is that the big pullback in the ESG movement were really on the two letters. One was S with DEI. Of course, you mentioned Costco as an example, where they held true to their values, and you point out that example admirably. Another one was E, the environment. Mm-hmm. And of course, you point out Yvon Chouinard in that example as well. The earth is our only stakeholder, was the quote that you shared. Bill Gates came out, right? And this was a big moment for the entire community. Someone who I think a lot of the CEOs were looking at as someone who could really steer us in the right direction. As you point out, that was a wake-up call for you, right? Bill Gates. He pointed out this year, that climate wasn't an existential threat to humanity, right? He pointed that out and said quite courageously in his own defense, that we need to focus on other areas and that humanity will continue to be around. Now I bring up this point because consumer trust is what's at stake here, and what we're seeing is potentially a shift away from companies who were sounding the alarm of environment. It's all about this and ESG and investment. As a company who's dormant right now in the background, the company you said, are you behind in the sidelines? What do you do in a situation like this right now?
Well, I think, Bill Gates, as you find with many headlines, his comments were more nuanced than that. And my sense of reading it afterwards, because everyone sort of responded to the clickbait if you're in this space, was that it's not the only threat in terms of existential crisis. And there are other issues readily at hand that we need to be addressing as well. And I think he was trying to, not to speak for him, counteract the exclusive or the singular, focus on that. And that there are many other issues equally pressing and equally threatening to our existence that we need to pay attention to as well. But the way that was reported in the press was it's not this existential threat. And I don't think that's accurate to what he was saying. At the same time, as you say, if people are sitting on the sidelines and consumer trust is at stake, it's interesting. It comes down to a simple decision. Will you let the tail wag the dog? Will you let the tail wag the dog? Do you say, okay, this is what consumers are concerned about today or tomorrow or the next day, or this is where political headwinds are blowing this way or that way? Or are you going to say, okay, this is who we are, this is our purpose, these are our values, and they don't change? And I think more so than ever, the marketplace is so turbulent that the value proposition, the dollars, the ROI value proposition of your purpose and values is more so than ever. For example, you see Target taking a $1.3 billion hit by estimates in terms of consumer boycott after their D&I efforts, and the CEO had to stand down. Meanwhile, Costco doubled down, and not only the leadership team, but the shareholders lent in, and they got huge bonus. You now see Target taking a second hit with shoppers occupying their stores in Minnesota. All of this reputational hit is so costly to a business. And you see Hilton trying to navigate the same thing as well in terms of what's going on in and around Minnesota as well. So all of that is to say that if you try to be expedient, if you let the tail wag the dog, you're in really troubled waters. So instead, if you want to win consumer trust, and if you want to navigate these very kind of disorientating times, the only thing you've got to hang your hat on is who you are, what you stand for, and staying true to that at any cost, because it's never going to be greater than the cost of losing your reputation, as we've seen through all of these examples.
Interesting. Well, it's again, today's conversation, whether it was in our CEO roundtable this morning to the presentation earlier and really throughout this entire week, one thing is clear: it certainly is an uncertain time, and we're waiting for decisions to be made, and we're waiting for politics, gosh forbid, to be to make a decision. And you're seeing markets changing and fluctuating every single day based on just what is being said by different people,
Yeah.
and especially our world leaders around the world. Now, you say this is the norm. This is the new norm, right? This is
Yeah.
something we have to get prepared for. Now, is it a risk or is it leadership to be someone who's going to go first and not wait for a political decision?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of thoughts on that. Not that this is the best example, but if you look at the tech sector over the years, they've always had that, run fast, break things, and so on. And if you listen to the AI dialogue out there, it's so iterative and exponentially so that you've got to keep changing quickly just to keep up. So speed is at a premium outright, just get ahead of it, just tonally right now at this time. At the same time, it's interesting what you said and the way you phrased it, and I think it's really common to what we see out there. People say these are uncertain times. The markets are uncertain. We live in unpredictable times. That outsources the responsibility for decision making to the times, to the market, to the days,
Right.
instead of us. Am I uncertain? Am I unpredictable? That's a choice. I can be certain based on my purpose and values. I can be predictable based on those choices. And I will absorb whether I'm right or wrong, and I can iterate quickly. My point being, if you take responsibility for certainty, for predictability, and at the same time you're willing to course correct quickly if it's not working out, then you have some ownership of what your experience of the marketplace. If you outsource that, if you abdicate responsibility and say, I'll know what to do when the markets tell me, or I'll know what to do when days are less uncertain, I think we're all going to go mad, because it's not coming anytime soon. And every time politics settles down, climate will come up. Every time climate comes up, AI will come along. There is no safe harbor anymore. And we have to be our own best counsel.
Simon, always a pleasure having you come on and speak to the Realers audience. For over 10 years now, this man's been
More. We
spreading
were
15
young and so
years.
full of promise when we began. Yeah.
Just been spreading so much wisdom with the audience. And again, the message is the same every year, isn't it? How do you lead in uncertainty? How do you lead in a complex and turbulent times? Simon Mainwaring, everybody, thank you so much for coming on. Now, last thing, where can people find more about the great work that We First Branding is doing. You shared so many examples today, of course, of
Yeah.
Sprouts and Mammoth. Share a little bit about that for our audience.
If you are interested at a brand level in terms of your strategy, your sustainability commitments, your culture, and your storytelling, we're at wefirstbranding.com. You can just check us out there, wefirstbranding.com. If you're interested in coaching and workshop and training and speaking with myself and the team, please reach out to me at Simon at wefirstbranding, Simon at wefirstbranding.com. And just thank you to the Real Leaders community. You know, when I talk about human scaffolding, you are the architects, you are the rallying point for that, without which, how on earth are we going to have a home to kind of come back to, and also to huddle in fear together and say, are we crazy for doing this? So thank you for being a container for all of us who care. Really appreciate it.
Of course, well, we're always here to provide that forum for people like you and many others that are watching this. Simon, the sun is set where you are. The sun is setting where I am right now here on the West Coast. We'll let you go. Enjoy your Friday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending your Friday night with the Real Leaders community.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've gotten to that point here on day 3 where it's time to say goodbye. As I mentioned earlier, the sun is setting here on the West Coast. But let's just maybe recap these 3 incredible, inspiring days that we all just witnessed. We had 7 of the top 50 keynote speakers who all went through a rigorous audition process. Again, we had over 100 plus applications just to be on the stage here today. And just want to give a quick shout out to all of the judges. We had Samantha Chris, a top keynote speaker coach, this is her 2nd year of being a judge. We had John Register, who I saw was on the chat today. Just a special shout out to John for vetting all of these speakers to ensure that this event was made possible. So thank you all for that. Other shout outs today, just Madeline Dwyer, also someone who is on our team. She was taking care of all of these speakers, coordinating everything. You have no idea what goes into these events. So just want to give a quick shout out to Madeline Dwyer for being here and supporting the Real Leaders community. Jeremy Trinchier, thank you so much for having the conversations with all these incredible leaders. Mark and Julia Van Ness, of course, our co-founders who have been supportive since day 1 of this journey. And lastly, this has always been a special time for CEOs and leaders of the community, as Simon mentioned, to rally and come together, right? They come to this place, and we call it Unite, because our mission here at Leaders is to unite better leaders for a better world. It is a forum where people should be able to come, share their experiences, bounce around ideas and experience sharing, and get help with whatever is keeping them up at night. And so part of that is one of the ways you can come to Unite next year and get to meet these incredible CEOs is to go online to realleaders.com today and get verified for 2027. It's a simple application. You don't have to wait until the end of the year. You can go and get verified today and set up your profile so you can start communicating the impact that you're making, the change that you're making in the world, and get connected with other CEOs in the community who are going through these turbulent times. That's it for us today, folks. An amazing 3 days with amazing 7 people. It is such an honor to be in this position to get to speak and meet and collaborate with all these incredible CEOs. Once again, if you deserve to be on stage, if you have something to say, we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and go online to realleaders.com and apply today. I don't want to sign off. I really don't. It's just been an amazing 3 days with you all. But that's it for me. Thank you for joining us on day 3, session 2 of Real Leaders Reunite 2026. That's it for me, and we'll see you next year.